Welcome to Ridge Church. We're so glad that you're here with us again on Sunday morning. My name is Krista, and I'm your pre-service host this morning. And in this pre-service, we're actually doing something a little bit different. We're looking back at the history of what MRBC has been, Maple Ridge Baptist Church, Ridge Church now, and many of you know that our church is over 100 years old. And part of looking back and sort of talking about the rich history we have here is wanting to share the stories of people that have come before. And we often talk about this idea that we stand on the shoulders of people of great faith that have gone before us. And so this morning, I have my first guest with me here, and I'm actually going to get her to introduce herself. And so, would you mind telling us who you are, what your name is, and when you started attending MRBC or Ridge Church?
Yeah, my name is Joan Newton. I started attending the church in 1971, roughly, but I didn't become a member until I moved here because I was living in Burnaby. So I became a member in 1972.
Yes.
I was on staff here for about 15 years.
Wonderful. Yes, and you're sort of considered our historian here,
yes,
right?
Sort of.
Yes, informal historian or unifficial, but very
unofficial.
Much. Yeah, very much. You really care about what's going on and what has gone on in the past, which is pretty great. Now I'm going to ask you a few personal questions. I would love to know, when did you kind of come to know Jesus?
I was 14, so it would be 64 years ago.
Yeah, wow.
I was attending a church in East Vancouver.
Yeah.
And through a tragedy in my home, I started looking for some help, and ended up starting to go to a church in East Vancouver, and then eventually, through a whole bunch of family things and so on, I did eventually go into teaching.
Right.
And I taught in Pitt Meadows.
Right.
My first principal in Pitt Meadows was Gordon Beckett, who was a long-term member of the church here.
Right.
And he and his wife Audrey really sort of shepherded me, I guess, if you like.
Right.
And I taught their 4 boys.
Right.
And but I started coming here started out as a volunteer with the Pioneer Girls program. Yeah, they kind of. I started out as a volunteer activities coordinator, and then eventually worked into a job as facilities manager.
Right.
And then eventually became Art Birch's ministry assistant.
Wow. So how fascinating that you had a connection with him long before you even started to attend
I just
here.
didn't know him.
Yeah.
But when he first came to the church, it didn't take long for me to put 2 and 2 together and realize who he was. Yeah.
Now looking like 65 years sort of in arrears, I suppose, and sort of looking back and thinking, wow, okay, this woman led me to the Lord, and now I have been following after Jesus for that number of years. Is it worth it, Joan? Like, now looking back, tell me what that looks like.
Well, had I not come to know the Lord, had he not led me to himself through his people, I probably would have ended up being a very different person. Right. I came from a family where alcohol was a problem, abuse was a problem, and to a certain extent poverty.
Right.
And but I had a half brother who helped me go through 2 years of university so I could start teaching.
Wow.
And when I started teaching, I started in Pitt Meadows, and Gordon Beckett was my first principal.
Wow.
And so that's how I got kind of tangled up, if you like,
Yes.
with Maple Ridge Baptist, because
Yes.
there was but it was an amazing experience, and things could have been quite different in my life if I had not come to know the Lord. And I haven't always walked that closely with him.
For sure.
But in those times when I kind of wandered away, he always used something or somebody, mainly people here, to draw me back to himself. And the singing Christmas tree was one of those.
Right.
One of those drawing cards, if you like.
Yeah, that actually like brings me into that question around like, what was it that our church how did we impact our city? And I think the singing Christmas tree was one of those things.
Yeah, the singing Christmas tree was definitely a real impactful program. And I think some of the other things, Vacation Bible School was was a tremendous, had a tremendous impact on the community.
Right.
And June Gustafson, who led Vacation Bible School and the Sunday School for many, many years,
Right.
they kind of recruited me to take over because they had 1 year where they couldn't get enough volunteers.
Right.
And so they had to cancel it. And that's the first time it was ever canceled in all of those years.
Wow. I know you were so heavily invested here and
Yeah.
served a lot. And I mean, what an interesting thing to see that because of lack of people serving and volunteering, that there was that gap in a ministry that was so successful
Yeah.
and that saw kids come to know Jesus. Like, that must have been somewhat heartbreaking and also motivating.
Vacation Bible School has always been, a huge draw for the whole community. I mean, there were times that, they had 500 kids.
It's amazing.
Sometimes more than that.
Right.
And it was at the old building on
Right.
the corner. It wasn't in here.
Right.
But it was interesting, one of the first big programs that they had in the new building, which is when this building opened in 1982, was the closing program for
Wow.
Vacation Bible School.
Wow.
So June got me involved with that, but then one of the things that I had to do was find out about the music.
Right.
And so the person that I went to find out about the music from was Grace Robinson. She was a mentor and just a huge blessing to me. She was, even in those times when I was rebellious and, she never gave up on me. We traveled together and,
Wow.
and then I almost feel like I became part of her family because she included me in family things like the Christmas Eve
Yes.
thing that they used to have at Lorraine and Milt Nelson's, and I was included as on the Christmas Eve
Yes.
party there, and then I just became almost like a member of the family.
Yeah. That's just a rich history again. Like
Yeah.
when I've been talking with different people, a lot of this idea that family it wasn't just like genetic or just somebody, like that connection. It was just really, I've heard a lot of people say, oh, Grace Robinson was Auntie Grace, or Gwen Wallace, Auntie Gwen. And this idea that the church family was your family.
That's
and,
right.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what was the age difference between you and Grace?
Well, she was born in 1929, and I was born in 1942.
Yes. All right.
So what, 13 years?
Yeah.
But she felt like a mother.
Yes.
Almost. She wasn't
Yes.
to me.
Yeah.
But I just was so taken, with the way she handled so many things in her life.
Right.
The death of her husband when she
Right.
was quite young and left with 6 boys, and
Right.
that always just amazed me. And she just was an amazing lady, and I don't know how many people I spoke to when I was talking to some people about getting involved in this project, and I don't know how many different people mentioned that she was a mentor to them, and
Right.
she certainly was a mentor to me, but she was much more than that.
Like, what was that? Because I know she was a woman of obviously of faith, but
Oh,
of prayer. And like, what did that look like to help you in your walk with Jesus? Like, how did that come alive for you?
Well, anytime we went anywhere or we did anything together, I felt like I was in the presence of a saint. She was a woman of prayer. She served the church faithfully, as difficult as it might have been in some cases, because she was trying to raise these 6 boys on her own.
Right.
And but she was influential in the fellowship also. She
Right.
used to be a delegate to the BC convention and also the national convention in Toronto.
Wow.
We went to California
Right.
at one time, she and I, and we met Art and Rosabelle there at the Saddleback
Right.
Church conference, and
Yeah.
she just was. She lived her faith.
Right.
She didn't just talk it.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know how many times she would drive me home. I used to live just a block away, and she would drive me home, and we'd sit outside my apartment in her car, and we'd just talk and talk and talk, and she never ever turned her back on me. And she never gave up on me.
Wow. It's
Constant.
amazing because, yeah, like for her, she would have been, single mother at a certain point, with 6 kids, heavily involved in the church, and yet made time for people. And that's possibly, a spiritual gift of hers to be somebody that is a shepherd of sorts, or whatever that looked like. But that's a beautiful picture of really, possibly not being too busy to care for people and to make the time.
She never was. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And really encouraging for the rest of us, to think of how much that impacted your life. And then, and really thinking about the future, Joan, like what is it that you hope to see for our church? Is it that, doing relationships and caring about the community that we have here? Or, what do you think about?
I think the thing that Maple Ridge Baptist Church has been known for is that they wanted the whole city to know him. And I mean, even in the early days of the church, they were reaching out to as far out as Wannock and Yenadon and also to Pitt Meadows. As a matter of fact, Grace Robinson and her husband Bill were one of the first groups of people couples, I guess you would call them, who did some work in Pitt Meadows. Right. And then eventually the church started Pitt Meadows Baptist and sent several couples to get that church going in Pitt Meadows. And one of the couples they sent was Grace's son, Stephen, your father-in-law,
yes,
and his wife. And then eventually what happened is that Burnett, which in fact started as an offshoot of Maple Ridge Baptist, and Pitt Meadows joined together and became, Burnett Fellowship. Right,
which is our sister church, just not
Pardon?
that far. That's our sister church, right?
Yep.
It's wonderful.
And then there was another work that was started out in Albion, and that was started by Maple Ridge Baptist Church.
That's right,
now.
Cornerstone, right?
Yeah, Cornerstone now.
Yeah.
And so that has always been a goal of the church, is to reach the whole city for Jesus. So.
And the fact that we can't do that alone, right? We need to be together in that mission. And the fact that might seem like a very lofty mission or goal, but yet it's one person at a time. It's just knowing that one person, just like how Grace, I guess, impacted your life as that was just one relationship, and yet made a huge difference in your life. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing today. We, if you guys just be encouraged as we continue to sort of go along in these stories. It is really cool to see how, sharing life together and making sure that we are either mentoring or discipling people towards Jesus is just a really integral part of what it means to be a part of the church. And so continue to come and join us in these pre-service times. As we go this morning, we're going to be worshiping together and just hearing from what Jonathan is going to preach. And so be blessed. Reach out to Joan perhaps and encourage her in sharing her story, and also consider how you can share your story with other people and encourage those who have either come that generation before you, or even think about the ones that are below you and how you can spur them on in following after Jesus. So thanks again for being with us this morning. Please worship together with us.